We may take for granted the documents that we have that allow us access to just being, that allow us access to our human rights. Today we're speaking about birth registration, and the birth certificate is a very important document, not just to register the child to get access to all their rights within the country, like healthcare, like legal care, but also access to traveling, and many other forms that a lot of people are not getting. In fact, in South Africa, at least 250,000 people have been waiting years for their applications for late birth registrations. We're still speaking about this important issue with Cecile Faver, attorney at the Legal Resources Centre. Let's speak about this very important case that's taking place, Cecile. You guys have taken the Western Cape High Court, you have taken the Department of Home Affairs to the court for these late registrations of birth. Tell us what the Department of Home Affairs says attributes to the slowness of these birth certificates.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of background to the case, so the Legal Resources Centre, we're representing the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town, and as well as 15 individual applicants. So these are parents or caregivers or guardians of children who have applied for birth certificates and are still waiting for the department effectively to take a decision on their application. So they are people who have been caught in the backlog that has accumulated with the department. Now, just in terms of a few numbers, the 258,000 number is not an estimate from our side. This is actually data that the Department of Home Affairs themselves provided to Parliament in 2023, when the then Minister of Home Affairs reported to Parliament that between 2018 and 2022, a backlog of about 258,000 late birth registration applications had accumulated. We don't have updated numbers on that. Our clients that we represent have all waited between 2 and 7 years for their applications to be decided. So they are people who have applied. Some of them applied 7 years ago, and we're still waiting for the Department of Home Affairs to make a decision on their applications. It's hard to say exactly what the department attributes to the backlog, because they haven't filed papers yet in this application. And the application is really aimed at trying to get them to deal with this backlog, but they haven't filed their answering papers yet, so we have no idea what their reasoning is. What we've picked up, and our clients have picked up just through experience, is that the department, despite it not being a requirement, insists on hosting interviews for all late birth registration applications. So when a person applies for a late birth registration, the department insists that in addition to the fact that you might meet all the documentary requirements that are set out in the Birth and Death Registrations Act and its regulations, they also insist on having an interview with you, which is not a legal requirement in all instances, but they insist on doing so. And these interviews take, there's not capacity. It doesn't seem like there's enough capacity for the department to deal with these interviews. And therefore it takes years and years and years for them to be decided. So we've seen now, since we've launched the litigation, that the department has tried to fast-track the applications for the individual applicants that we're representing, so those 15 people that we are representing, and they've actually made a decision on the majority of them, and they've run the interviews. But what was quite disheartening is just the feedback that we received from our clients in terms of what happened in these interviews. Despite it not being a legal requirement, they've had to go through it. But the interviews were not really used as an opportunity to test any of the veracity or the credibility of the documents that our clients submitted. It was more an opportunity for the department to kind of scold our clients for submitting late birth registrations in the first place, which in many instances our clients had very good reasons as to why it had happened, right? So it wasn't really a useful exercise anyway, despite not being a legal requirement. So there seems to be sort of quite a few points at which the department they're almost making their lives a little bit more difficult than it has to be. If the interview is not a requirement and you're not going to use it for anything that is useful, then perhaps don't do it. That's sort of, because that's definitely attributing to the backlog. The department has publicly come out and said that the backlog is far less than we say. They are saying at the moment we're looking at about a 33,000 applicant backlog. We have no way of knowing whether that's true or not. They haven't put any of that to the court. They haven't put any of that in writing. That's just something that they've sort of publicly spoken about. But at the moment, we have no way of verifying that information.
Is it correct to assume that most of these people who are struggling with these late birth registrations are those of lower socioeconomic status?
Yeah, I think that's a very good assumption to make. I mean, it's not exclusive. We've had, in the wake of the application being launched, we have had people approach us who are, I would classify sort of as, having the financial resources and the ability to perhaps pursue these sorts of applications on their own. So it's not an exclusive problem to people who struggle, but it certainly, I think, is more predominant within especially rural communities where people don't have access to Home Affairs or simply don't have the money to travel to a Department of Home Affairs. That's also a very big problem, is that people don't always have the money to maybe take a taxi or transport or whatever to go to Home Affairs. And in this instance, with late birth registration applications, you often see clients going multiple times. I mean, many of our clients had to go 6, 7, 8 times before they were able to first submit an application. So if you are sitting in a rural area without access to these services and without the financial ability to do so, it's very likely that you're going to be somebody who might not apply or might get caught up in the late birth registration process.
Cecile, really quickly, let's speak about the intergenerational ripple effect of this particular case. If you become an adult or maybe even a pregnant teenager who hasn't had their own birth certificate or their ID, that automatically means that your child will also be delayed in that. So it seems like it's something that's going to, create problems well into different generations of these families.
Yeah, and we saw that with our applicants. There were some of our applicants who were in exactly that position. They themselves, the mothers did not have birth certificates, or they either didn't have birth certificates, or if they had a birth certificate, they might not have had their ID yet because they were teen mothers. So without that ID document, it's almost impossible to register the birth of your child if you yourself don't have the required documents. What we also see is just, a lot of times, especially in rural areas, parents leave children with grandparents and they go off to the cities to work. And then the grandparent themselves might not be documented. So you might have a grandparent who doesn't have an ID themselves. But now they also don't have access to the ID of their daughter, whose child it is, or whose grandchild they're looking after. So you see that sort of like intergenerational thing where you've got a mother without a birth certificate. You might even have a grandmother without a birth certificate, and how that sort of just plays out generation upon generation.
All right, Cecile, we'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much for unpacking this for us. And before we go on a break, we just want to note that we have reached out to the Department of Home Affairs, since this is a legal case with them, to give them a right of reply. And once we get that response from them, we will certainly come back to you and, give them a right to reply on air as well. Thank you, Cecile, for your time. That's Cecile van Schalkwyk, attorney at the Legal Resources Center, speaking about the backlog in birth certificate or birth registrations here at the Department of Home Affairs in South Africa. It's 9:30.